you were to the doctor's.
Why does this happen every week to me?
Never mind, it's just introducing the cast. Forget about that.
The pen touches paper, and the partnership dies. Not today, not tomorrow, but in this moment, in this room, with this signature, the countdown begins. Lou Costello doesn't know it yet. He's laughing, probably. He's always laughing. But Bud Abbott knows exactly what he just agreed to, and he will spend the next 20 years pretending he doesn't. The contract gives Abbott 60% of everything. Every laugh Lou earns, every pratfall he takes, every time he screams, "Hey Abbott," and America falls in love with the chubby little man who can't catch a break, Bud gets the bigger cut. Not because he works harder, not because he's funnier, because he got there first, and because Lou trusted him. That trust will cost Lou Costello his health, his fortune, his family, and eventually his life. It will cost Bud Abbott something worse, the knowledge that he earned none of it and that everyone who mattered knew. Here is what America saw. Two men who loved each other, who finished each other's sentences, who made the whole country laugh during the darkest years of the 20th century. Here is what America didn't see. A business arrangement so poisonous that by the end, the man who made people laugh couldn't stand to be in the same room as the man who cashed the checks. This is not a story about comedy. This is a story about what happens when friendship gets a contract and only one person reads the fine print. Before there was Abbott and Costello, there was just Lou, a kid from Paterson, New Jersey who wanted so badly to be somebody that he'd do almost anything to get there. Louis Francis Castillo grew up poor, the son of Italian immigrants in a house where love was loud but money was scarce. He was small, he was round, he was relentlessly, almost desperately cheerful. The neighborhood kids mocked him for his size, and Lou learned early that he could make them laugh first, they couldn't hurt him as much. That was the lesson that built his entire life. Be funny before they're cruel. Make them need you, make them love you, and whatever you do, don't let them see you scared. He dropped out of school, drifted through odd jobs, lied his way into Hollywood as a stuntman by claiming experience he didn't have. He doubled for Dolores Del Rio in drag. He worked the burlesque circuit, learning how to control a crowd, how to time a pause, how to turn humiliation into applause. By his mid-20s, Lou Costello had become one of the most reliable comic performers on the circuit. He could get a laugh out of anything. What he couldn't do was sell himself. He needed a straight man. He needed someone who looked respectable, someone who could handle the business side, someone the theater owners would trust. He needed, in other words, exactly what he shouldn't have needed. Enter William Alexander Abbott. Bud was everything Lou was not. Tall, thin, well-spoken, smooth in a room. He'd grown up in show business. His parents worked with Barnum and Bailey, and he understood the mechanics of entertainment the way a jeweler understands watches. Bud had tried performing himself with limited success. He'd worked as a cashier at a burlesque house, then as a producer, then as a straight man for various comics. He was competent, he was professional. He was not, by any measure, a star. What Bud Abbott had was timing, presence, and patience. He knew how to set up a joke, he knew how to let someone else land it, and he knew how to negotiate. The two men met in the mid-1930s on the burlesque circuit. Some accounts say they clicked immediately. Others suggest it took time for the chemistry to settle. But eventually, inevitably, they became a team. Lou was the engine, Bud was the steering wheel, and from the very beginning, Bud made sure he was also the one holding the keys. Stop here and understand what happened next, because this is where the story bends into tragedy. Lou Costello, the man who did all the falling, all the screaming, all the physical comedy that destroyed his body night after night, agreed to give Bud Abbott a larger share of their earnings. The split, by most accounts, was 60-40 in Abbott's favor. Why would Lou accept this? Because Lou didn't think he was worth more. Because Bud made the deal and Lou didn't have the stomach to fight him. Because in Lou's mind, Bud was the business guy, the respectable one, the partner who could talk to producers without embarrassing himself. Lou was just the clown. Clowns, in his experience, didn't get to ask for more. This was not a decision made in desperation. Lou agreed to these terms when they were already successful, when he already had leverage, when anyone looking at the act could see that the crowd came for him. But Lou Costello, for all his genius on stage, had never outgrown the fat kid from Patterson who thought he had to earn every ounce of love. Bud Abbott understood this, and Bud Abbott used it. Some partnerships survive inequality. Some even thrive on it, but this contract did something subtle and devastating. It told Lou in writing that Bud mattered more. Every check they cashed reinforced the lie. Every negotiation reminded Lou of his place. And every time Lou's body broke down from the physical demands of their act, the falls, the slaps, the endless exertion, he knew that Bud was taking the bigger cut for standing still and looking annoyed. The resentment didn't come all at once. It came in layers, over years, accumulating like sediment until the friendship couldn't breathe. By 1940, Abbott and Costello were the biggest comedy team in America. Their radio appearances drew millions. Their film debut, One Night in the Tropics, led to a rapid succession of hits. Buck Privates, Hold That Ghost, In the Navy, Keep 'Em Flying. Universal Pictures, which had been on the verge of bankruptcy, suddenly found itself flush with cash. The studio owed its survival to two men, one of whom was doing most of the work, and the other of whom was keeping most of the money. The act was deceptively simple. Bud played the con man, the schemer, the guy who always had an angle. Lou played the patsy, the victim, the man who wanted to trust and kept getting burned. The most famous routine, Who's on First, was a masterclass in comic escalation, Lou's confusion building and building until the audience couldn't breathe. Watch that routine carefully and you'll notice something. Bud never breaks his sweat. Lou does all the work. Bud just keeps poking, keeps needling, keeps feeding Lou enough rope to hang himself. The audience laughed at Lou's frustration, but the real frustration was never a performance. Behind the camera, their dynamic was not so different. Bud handled the contracts. Bud met with the studio executives. Bud decided which projects they'd accept and which they'd turn down. Lou showed up, did his job, and trusted that Bud was looking out for both of them. That trust was misplaced. Bud was looking out for Bud, and the contract that bound them gave Lou no room to object. Here is the cruelest detail of all. Lou Costello loved Bud Abbott. Not professionally, personally. He invited Bud to family dinners. He considered Bud one of his closest friends. He named one of his children after him. For years, Lou believed that the partnership was more than business, that Bud saw him the way he saw Bud. And maybe Bud did in the beginning, but money has a way of eroding even the most genuine affection. The more successful they became, the more obvious the imbalance grew, and the more Bud had to justify it to himself. The justification went something like this. Bud was the professional. Bud was the one who kept Lou in line, who kept him from going off script, who made sure the act stayed tight. Without Bud, Lou would be just another loud comic playing third-rate houses. Bud made Lou a star. Lou owed everything to Bud. The 60% wasn't greed, it was fair compensation for keeping the whole enterprise from falling apart. Bud may have even believed this. People usually do when the lie benefits them. But the numbers told a different story. Universal's internal memos, trade publications, audience surveys, everyone knew who the draw was. Lou Costello made people laugh. Bud Abbott made sure the checks cleared. Both jobs mattered, only one was irreplaceable. Then tragedy struck, and the imbalance stopped being abstract. In November 1943, Lou Costello Jr., called Butch by the family, drowned in the family swimming pool. He was not quite 1 year old. Lou received the news just before he was scheduled to perform a live radio broadcast. He did the show anyway. He did the whole show. He told jokes, hit his marks, made millions of people laugh while his infant son's body was still warm. When the broadcast ended, Lou collapsed. He wouldn't be the same again. Some grief breaks a person open. This grief broke something inside Lou that never healed. He became erratic, volatile, depressive. His weight fluctuated wildly. His health deteriorated. He threw himself into work with an intensity that scared the people around him, and then he disappeared into silence for days at a time. He needed support. He needed compassion. He needed someone to tell him that he mattered beyond the act. What Lou got from Bud Abbott was professionalism. Bud kept the trains running. Bud made sure the contracts stayed in place. Bud expected Lou to show up, perform, and keep earning. This was not villainy. This was Bud's nature. He was a businessman who happened to work in comedy. He was not equipped to be a grief counselor. But in Lou's eyes, this was the moment the friendship should have meant something, and it didn't. Bud didn't know how to be there for Lou, or maybe he didn't want to. The result was the same. Lou started to realize that the partnership was exactly what the contract said it was, a transaction, nothing more. The IRS came for them in 1945, and this is where the structure of their deal became a weapon turned inward. Abbott and Costello owed the government nearly $500,000 in back taxes, a staggering sum at the time. The debt was joint because the partnership was joint, but the resources to pay it were not distributed equally. Bud, with his 60%, had saved more. Lou, with his 40% and his extravagant lifestyle and his desperate attempts to fill the hole left by his son's death, had saved less. When the reckoning came, Lou was more exposed. He had to liquidate assets, sell property, scramble to stay solvent. Bud was hurt too, but Bud survived in better shape. Lou couldn't help but notice this. He couldn't help but do the math. For every dollar the IRS took, Bud had earned more and kept more. The pain was supposed to be equal. It wasn't. The partnership had always been a lie, and now the lie had a price tag. Lou began to pull away. He started making creative decisions without consulting Bud. He started complaining, privately, about the split. He started treating Bud less like a friend and more like what Bud had always been, a contractor. Bud responded the way businessmen do when they sensed a deal slipping away. He tightened his grip. He reminded Lou, in ways subtle and direct, who made their success possible. He let Lou know that without Bud's discipline, Lou was just a chaotic talent, brilliant but unmanageable. Lou heard something else. "You need me. I don't need you." That message may or may not have been true, but Lou believed it. And believing it made him angrier than he'd ever been. By the late 1940s, Abbott and Costello were still working together, still producing hits, still making America laugh. But anyone close to them could see the fractures. They traveled separately, they socialized separately. On set, they spoke only when the cameras were rolling. The warmth was gone. What remained was obligation. Lou's health continued to decline. The physical toll of the act, decades of falls, impacts, contortions, had ravaged his body. He had rheumatic fever. He had heart problems. He was overweight and overtaxed and running on empty. When he couldn't perform, Bud found other straight men to work with, temporarily. This wasn't unreasonable. The business had to continue. But Lou saw it as proof of something he'd always feared. Bud could replace him. The partnership wasn't a marriage, it was a job, and Lou was the employee. The contract became a symbol of everything Lou had surrendered. He'd given Bud 60% of his talent, 60% of his body, 60% of his life. And what had he gotten in return? A friend who kept his distance, a partner who counted every dollar, a collaborator who never once said, "Let's renegotiate, let's make this fair." Lou had asked over the years. Bud had refused. Bud had what he wanted. Why would he give it up? The television era should have been a second act. Instead, it became a slow unraveling. The Abbott and Costello show ran from 1952 to 1954, and it introduced the duo to a new generation. But the production was troubled. Lou was increasingly difficult to work with, sick, distracted, furious beneath the surface. Bud was colder than ever, protecting his position, insisting on creative control. The show was funny, the show was successful, and the show hid a partnership that existed only on paper. After the series ended, they made a few more films, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, among others, but the magic was gone. The routines that once crackled now felt rehearsed. The chemistry that once seemed effortless now seemed like acting. Audiences could sense it. Critics noticed it. By the mid-1950s, Abbott and Costello were no longer the biggest comedy team in America. They were a nostalgia act, coasting on goodwill they'd built decades earlier. And then, finally, they stopped. In 1957, Abbott and Costello officially dissolved their partnership. They filed papers, they divided assets, they walked away from each other, and they never worked together again. 30 years of collaboration ended with signatures, the same way it had begun. What did Lou Costello do with his freedom? He tried to prove he didn't need Bud. He took solo bookings, appeared on television variety shows, attempted a dramatic turn that nobody wanted to see. Without Bud to anchor him, Lou's energy scattered. He was funny, still, he would always be funny, but he was funny the way a firework is bright, spectacular, brief, exhausting. He needed a straight man. He needed someone to absorb his chaos and reflect it back as rhythm. He'd spent his whole career resenting that need. Now he was defined by it. Bud Abbott fared no better. Without Lou, Bud was exactly what he'd always been, a competent professional with no particular spark. He tried other partnerships, none of them worked. The straight man, it turned out, was only as good as the comic he was setting up. Bud had spent decades believing he was essential. Now he learned the truth. He was essential to Lou. Without Lou, he was nobody. They circled each other those last years. Occasional phone calls, rumors of reunions that never materialized. Men who had been brothers in everything but blood, now strangers in everything but memory. The contract had done its work. It had told them every single day that one was worth more than the other, and in the end, they'd both believed it. Lou Costello died on March 3, 1959. He was 52 years old. His heart gave out, finally, after decades of strain. The death certificate listed myocardial infarction, but that was only the mechanical explanation. Lou Costello died from exhaustion, physical, emotional, spiritual. He died from a body that had taken too much punishment and a soul that had never stopped seeking approval. He died from the weight of a contract that told him his talent was worth 60 cents on the dollar. At the funeral, Bud Abbott was present. Some reports say he wept. Others say he stood in the back, apart from the family, uncertain of his welcome. What he felt, only he knew. Guilt, perhaps. Loss, certainly. Maybe even love. The kind of love that had been there once, before the money got in the way. Or maybe just the realization that his greatest success was inseparable from a man who had died resenting him. Either way, Bud Abbott would live another 15 years. They were not happy years. Bud's later life was a slow descent. His money ran out. His health failed. Epilepsy, which he'd hidden for decades, became unmanageable. He sold his home, moved into a smaller and smaller existence, and watched his legacy shrink to a footnote. When he died in 1974, he was not rich. He was not celebrated. He was remembered, if he was remembered at all, as the straight man, the other one, the one who wasn't Lou. The 60-40 had bought him nothing. The contract had been a trap for both of them. Here is what the contract did in the end. It made two men who loved each other calculate that love in percentages. It inserted a dollar sign into every joke, every performance, every moment of shared triumph. It told Lou that Bud valued him at 40% of a partnership Lou had built with his body. It told Bud that he deserved 60% of something he couldn't do alone. Neither interpretation was true. Both became true because they believed them. That is what happens when friendship becomes a transaction. The transaction becomes all there is. The friendship disappears beneath the math. You look at your partner and see not a person, but a line item. You remember not the laughter, but the invoices. You count your grievances because counting has become the only language you speak. Lou Costello and Bud Abbott made America laugh for 30 years. They created routines that still work, that children still quote, that will outlast almost anyone who remembers them. Who's on First is in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Their films are still broadcast, still loved, still shared. The partnership was one of the most successful in entertainment history. And it ended in silence, in resentment, in two men dying alone, each convinced the other had taken something that couldn't be given back. Look again at the contract. Look at that signature, that agreement, that piece of paper that seemed, at the time, like just business. Lou trusted Bud. Bud took what Lou offered. And somewhere in that exchange, the friendship ended before it had really begun. The tragedy is not that they fought. The tragedy is not that they split. The tragedy is that they could have fixed it, any day, any year, for any reason, and neither of them did. The contract said 60-40. They chose to believe it. And what they believed, they became. There is a question that hangs over every comedy team, every partnership, every collaboration between people who need each other. What are you worth without the other person? Abbott and Costello spent their careers trying not to answer it. Then they spent their final years finding out. The answer was lonelier than either of them imagined. If this story leaves you thinking about the partnerships you've seen destroyed by money, by ego, by contracts that should never have been signed, you are not alone. Hollywood is full of duos who couldn't survive their own success. Some of them are still working. Some of them are still pretending. And some of them, right now, are signing papers that will end the only friendship that ever mattered for a percentage that will never be enough.